Aliko Dangote is the richest man in Africa today. He has strings of businesses in several parts of Africa and beyond. This appears to be a trait in his lineage. His great-grandfather, Alhassan Dantata, was also a serial entrepreneur who, through his dint of hard work, became the richest man in Africa several years before the present age. This video presents a story of the life and times of Alhassan Dantata. We discuss his birth, his parentage, his venture into businesses, his contact with early European traders, and his ascension to the enviable height of being the richest man in Africa in his time. Welcome to this edition of Back in History. Alhassan Dantata was born in 1877. He lived till 17th August 1955. He was born in Bebeji, in Kano Emirates, which at the time was under the Sokoto Caliphate. His father was Abdullahi Dantata and his mother's name was Amaria. Alhassan's parents were business people and business was in the family's lineage for many years. They engaged in long-distance trading. Through their involvement in businesses, the parents themselves became wealthy. They raised their children dutifully and also introduced them to the basic principles of trading and legitimate wealth multiplication. Alhassan's father died in Bebeji in 1885. His wealth was then distributed to his children in accordance with Islamic law of inheritance. Alhassan grew up from thenceforth without a father. His mother was alive but relocated to Ghana, where she had huge business interests. She remained there for several years, but before she left Bebeji, she had handed over her children, including Alhassan, to the care of a trusted slave woman whose name was Tata. Alhassan grew to become a man and plunged deeply into trading. He traded in various commodities like kola nuts and groundnuts. He started small but grew big and became a major dealer on these commodities. Smaller dealers sold to him, and he in turn sold to bigger dealers from across what is today the present-day Nigeria and other parts of Africa. He was also a much sought-after dealer on these commodities to European traders who needed the commodities in good quantities for supply to companies in Europe in the wake of the Industrial Revolution. Alhassan Dantata soon became a trusted ally to the European traders and was made a distributor of European goods. He made a fortune from trading and used the proceeds therefrom to cater for his family and extended his hand in philanthropy. He had the bulk of his assets in Ghana and in Nigeria. During his time, the movement of goods across several kilometers and across borders was done majorly with the use of donkeys and caravans. Alhassan then thought of something innovative and much rewarding. Instead of bringing kola nuts and other goods on packs of animals, he used steamships to transport them between Accra, Kumasi, Sekondi, and Lagos by water. He was the first to develop this route, and the idea brought him so much wealth as he was able to transport more goods at a time and was able to supply to more customers, including major European businessmen in both Ghana and Nigeria. In 1906, he began broadening his interest by trading on beads, necklaces, European clothes, and many more. This new venture added more money to Alhassan and made him even more richer. It is stated that as at 1918, Alhassan was the supplier of half of the kola nuts and groundnuts purchased from northern Nigeria by the Royal Niger Company, which later became known as the United Africa Company, UAC. By 1922, Dantata had become the richest man in Kano, surpassing other merchant traders. He had many business connections both in Nigeria and in other West African countries, particularly the Gold Coast, now Ghana. He traded not only in groundnuts and kola nuts, but also in other commodities. He traded in cattle, clothes, beads, precious stones, grains, rope, and other items. Dantata had accumulated sufficient wealth and then thought of sponsoring his pilgrimage to Mecca. In 1920, he embarked on a trip by boat to Mecca. It was a long trip by boat, but Dantata considered it worthwhile and had to embark on it in fulfillment of religious injunction. On this trip, he also went to England and was presented to King George V, who warmly received him as a reliable partner in trade to the British Empire. Dantata later returned to face his businesses at home. During his lifetime, he financed the pilgrimages of other Muslims to Mecca, a tradition that continues among his descendants. His son, Alhaji Aminu Dantata, and his grandchildren, like Hajiya Maria Senusi Dantata, as well as his great-grandchild, Aliko Dangote, still finance pilgrimages of other Muslims to Mecca every year till this day, in keeping with the tradition of their forebear and as part of the fulfillment of a religious obligation. In 1929, when the Bank of West Africa opened a branch in Kano, Dantata placed 20 camel loads of silver coins in it. This was the biggest deposit to the bank at the time. For religious reasons, he insisted that his money should not attract interest. Shortly before his death, he pointed to 60 groundnut pyramids in Kano and said, quote, "These are all mine." End of quote. Dantata lived a successful life by every reasonable assessment. In every business he ventured into, he was successful at it. He believed in the philosophy inherent in multiple streams of income. He profited immensely from it. He employed experienced hands to assist him in his businesses. He had a chief accountant whose name was Alhaji Gaba Maisikeli. Maisikeli was a trusted employee to Dantata and had served him for more than 30 years. In 1955, Dantata took ill. He received the best attainable medical attention at the time and also hoped on the divine for intervention. His health situation rather got more serious by the day, and because of the seriousness, Dantata summoned his chief financial controller, Gaba Maisikeli, and all his children for a meeting. At the meeting, he narrated to them how his health had gone down. He told them that his days were approaching their end and advised them to live together in harmony as true representatives and custodian of the name of the family. He was particularly concerned about the company he had established, Alhassan Dantata and Sons. He asked them not to allow the company to collapse. He implored them to continue to marry within the family as much as possible. He urged them to avoid clashes with other wealthy Kano merchants. He admonished them not only to take care of themselves, but to also take care of their relatives, especially the poor among them. He prayed with them and allowed them to disperse. 3 days later, Alhassan Dantata died in his sleep on Wednesday, 17th August 1955. He was buried in his house in the Sarari ward following a funeral prayer conducted in accordance with the Islamic faith, of which he had been a committed follower. His death brought to an end an era in the history of commerce in northern Nigeria, Nigeria as a whole, Ghana, and other countries in Africa, and his death was widely reported. Some descendants of Alhassan Dantata include the following person: Amadu Dantata, who lived from 1916 to 1960. Amadu was Alhassan's son. He was a well-known politician. Senusi Dantata, who lived from 1917 to 1997. Sanusi was also Alhassan's son. Sanusi was a successful businessman. There was also Mudi Suleiman Dantata, who lived from 1916 to 1960. Mudi was Alhassan's son. He was a successful businessman. There was also Aminu Dantata, who was a son to Alhassan Dantata. Aminu was born in 1931. He was a successful businessman too. Alhassan also had a son by name Mahmoud Dantata. Mahmoud lived from 1922 to 1983. He attended the University of Gold Coast, and upon his graduation, he became his father's secretary. He assisted his father immensely in the modernization of his businesses. Through this, his father became richer as proper records were now kept and leakages blocked. The other descendant is Alhaji Abdul Kadir Dantata, Alhassan's grandson. Aliko Dangote, Africa's richest businessman, is also a grandson of Alhassan Dantata. The Dantata dynasty thus remains a family to behold till this day. Their hard work and interest in businesses has transcended ages to the admiration of many. By all accounts, Alhassan Dantata was hardworking, frugal, and had an eye for gainful business ventures. He was also a good financial manager. He did not manage his businesses in absentia, but was involved in the day-to-day running of the businesses. He had a good life by all reasonable assessments. At his death, he died a fulfilled man. Wikipedia, a renowned online encyclopedia, has noted thus in its publication about Alhassan Dantata, quote, "At the time of his death, he was the wealthiest man in West Africa. He is the great-grandfather of Aliko Dangote, the wealthiest person in Nigeria and Africa." End of quote. The name Alhassan Dantata shall remain in the history books of successful businessmen in sub-Saharan Africa and beyond for many more years to come. Thanks for watching this edition of Back in History, and do remember to subscribe to the channel or follow the page for regular notification on every new video. I remain your friend and host, Ekeminudim, wishing you the best of time as we continue to dig into the archives to recall the history of Africa and the world.